Right now, I'd like to introduce the Parliament's own Dr. Miriam Renaud to talk to you a little bit about our declaration towards the global ethic.
Good afternoon. So I'm Dr. Miriam Renaud. I work for the Parliament of the World's Religions, and my particular role there is as Principal Investigator and Program Director of the Global Ethic Project. So I'm here to talk to you today about the document that's been the signature document of the Parliament of the World's Religions since 1993. So its official title is this, Towards a Global Ethic, an Initial Declaration, which is quite a mouthful, which is why we call it the Global Ethic for short. In the early 1990s, there was a question that preoccupied Hans Küng, a Swiss Catholic theologian who rose to international prominence in the 1960s because he was one of the key players in the Vatican II reforms. The question that preoccupied Küng was this: can there be peace in the world if there's no peace between the religions? Here's Küng. So if the answer to the question, can there be peace in the world if there's no peace between the religions, is no, then Küng's next question was, well, how can there be peace between the religions? And he eventually came to the conclusion that peace between the religions required a global ethic. A global ethic. So I want to draw your attention to the word ethic. Küng used the word ethic instead of the more familiar term ethics quite intentionally. Ethics with an S usually refers to a theory of morality or abstract ethical principles. Küng, however, wasn't interested in theory or abstract principles, so he called for an ethic with no S, because ethic refers to ethos, or a way of life that's guided by certain ethical commitments. By calling for a global ethic, Küng was in essence calling for a global ethos, or a global way of life that would lead to peace between the religions, and so to peace in the world. So you might be asking, well, why do we need a global ethic if we already have the UN's Declaration of Human Rights? Well, the short answer is that the global ethic and human rights don't cover the same spheres of life. Human rights are enforced by laws, by treaties, by governments, and various institutional stakeholders. In contrast, an ethic or ethos operates on a person-to-person level. An ethic is primarily concerned with our relationship with other people and our inner lives, our conscience, the ways of our hearts, our attitudes, much of which is beyond the reach of laws and treaties. So here's an example of what I mean. Let's say I'm in a convenience store and I see a $10 bill fall out of the pocket of a woman's jacket. So if I say nothing to her and I walk away, no one's going to arrest me because I haven't broken any laws. And yet I recognize, and on some level we all do, I think, that some options are more ethical than others. Law or no law, we understand that other people make certain moral demands on us. This is also true of other living beings and of our earthly home. They also make certain moral demands on us. That's what Küng realized. He thought that a basic set of moral demands or ethical commitments were already known to us, even if we routinely ignore them. He was certain that the minimal ethical commitments that make peaceful coexistence possible are not a mystery. He was convinced that from the dawn of time, these commitments have been understood or known or intuited by human beings, because who doesn't want to live a life free of chaos and fear and violence and brutal coercion? Now, many people who engage in interfaith dialogue want to leave space for others whose religious and cultural norms are different from their own. Many believe that respecting religions and cultures means respecting their teachings and practices. My guess is that you also agree that oppressed people have always wanted a say in their affairs. Women have always wanted power over their lives. Children have always wanted to be able to play and learn and discover. That's why Kuhn was certain that over the past thousands of years, ethical demands that express those yearnings have been integrated, at least in some implicit form, into religious and non-religious texts, teachings, rituals, and moral codes. So here's a quote from the Parliament's Global Ethic. Several leaders of the Parliament of the world's religions learned of Kuhn's call for a global ethic to secure peace between the religions and in the world. These leaders asked him to identify and set down this global ethic in a document. And they wanted this in time to share it at the International Interfaith convening that was planned in 1993 right here in Chicago. As he got to work on the global ethic, Kuhn realized that he needed to develop some parameters for its content. He decided that it could not duplicate the Declaration on Human Rights, since an ethos is different from rights. He decided that the global ethic had to focus on a deep moral level rather than the superficial level of laws. It must be capable of winning buy-in from the world's religions. It must be self-critical. It must reflect reality, what is the current state of affairs. It must be stated in ordinary language so anyone can read it. And it must have a religious foundation, although it could not contain any explicit religious language in order to be inclusive of all the world's religious, spiritual, and secular traditions. Kuhn then reached out to his vast network of scholars and religious leaders from various religions and parts of the world to ask for their feedback on his working draft of the global ethic. After he completed this draft, he handed it to the Parliament's leaders, who in turn sought feedback from their own vast networks of scholars and religious leaders. By the time the global ethic was adopted by the Parliament as its official document in 1993, over 200 experts had been consulted. Afterward, hundreds more people indicated their support by signing the global ethic. And if you look for me afterwards, I'll be happy to tell you how you too can add your signature to the global ethic. The global ethic includes 5 ethical directives or imperatives, and here they are. Commitment to a culture of nonviolence and respect for life. Commitment to a culture of solidarity and a just economic order. Commitment to a culture of tolerance and a life of truthfulness. Commitment to a culture of equal rights and partnership between men and women. Commitment to a culture of sustainability and care for the earth. Notice that each directive starts with the phrase commitment to a culture. That's because by calling for a commitment to a culture of, the global ethic is calling for change in our inner orientation and in our way of being in the world. It calls for us to try to become more conscious of our responsibilities towards others and to act on those responsibilities even when this calls for us to make sacrifices. The global ethics directives are bold and beautiful, but without detail, they can sound like empty platitudes, which is why each of them is given greater precision in the document. For example, the first directive, Commitment to a Culture of Nonviolence and Respect for Life, states that in all the world's religious and ethical traditions, we find demands like, you shall not kill, or in positive terms, have respect for life. The first directive then goes on to answer the questions that naturally follow. What does it mean not to kill? What does it mean to have respect for life? So here are some of the details that are spelled out for the first directive. Let us reflect anew on the consequences of this ancient directive. All people have a right to life, safety, and the free development of personality, insofar as they do not injure the rights of others. No one has a right physically or psychically to torture, injure, much less kill any other human being. And no people, no state, no race, no religion has the right to hate, to discriminate against, to cleanse, to exile, much less to liquidate a foreign minority, which is different in behavior or holds different beliefs. So this is part of the details that the global ethic goes into with respect to the first directive. And so it goes on. Here's more from the first directive. And here's another slide that shows a portion of the global ethic. It's about the various faiths formulating the global ethic for themselves. So it goes, we urge the various communities of faith to formulate their very specific ethic. So using the global ethic as a conversation starter to then go on to formulate this ethic in their own particular way out of their own tradition. I think that when you have a chance to review the entire text of the global ethic, which you can find on the Parliament's website, I believe you will conclude that it does an impressive job of capturing what people say when they're given a voice about how they wish to be treated, when they're asked about what kind of society they want to live in, and when they're invited to describe their vision of a good life. So thank you for your very kind attention, and I will be towards the back there where there's some posters about the global ethic, and I'll be more than happy to tell you more about it. Thank you so much.